We're continuing with our short series, just describing every race in case you don't know what they do. Next up is Bretonnia. They are an interesting faction. They kind of function as Arthurian Knight or Arthurian Legend, classic knights in shining armor and damsels in distress. They have a whole campaign mechanic about chivalry, meaning you need to make quote-unquote good guy decisions, and you will be rewarded. If you do anything cowardly or craven or treacherous, they will punish you for that. They do have multiple lords, though most of their campaigns function relatively the same way. Their roster is not the largest, so you better be interested in heavy cavalry and peasant spam, otherwise you will be disappointed. Being an order faction, they are largely about empire building, making your kingdom larger and larger, confederation, trade, all those sorts of things. Not really a faction that does any raiding. In multiplayer, Bretonnia is interesting. In domination mode, they do struggle. Their infantry can't hold the point worth a darn. Low leadership, low armor, extremely terrible holding infantry. But their heavy cavalry is quite good. Also, unfortunately, in the current state of Dom, it's hard to get a lot of summons of cavalry out onto the field, and cavalry individually can easily be taken apart or shot or destroyed. Cavalry needs to be in mass to do good work, so they will struggle there, I foresee. As for land battles, they're actually in a pretty good space most of the time. You'll always have your Bretonnia mains who are big fans of them, and their heavy cav micro, while difficult for newer players to pull off, more veteran players are quite adept at that, and I feel like they will always be around. They also have a good mix of knights, no matter what the meta is, whether you need cheap armored cav, mid-tier cav, or high-tier armor-piercing cav, maybe even some magic damage from the Grail Knights. I feel like some of their knights will always be meta. Now, if cavalry in general sucks, Bretonnia in general is also going to suck because they have nothing to fall back on. Extremely limited artillery options, extremely limited skirmish options, and all of their infantry, it looks mildly diverse, but it is mostly peasants. Foot squires are usually not very cost-effective, and battle pilgrims also struggle. So their infantry is terrible, their archers are great, but with nothing to defend them, and their heavy cav is excellent. Now, they do have a couple flying cavalry options, but in general, their flying corps are quite weak. They're very expensive and fragile. Mostly all you have to fear is on-the-ground knights. A couple air stuff is some cheese, but you can usually take it out with spell kiting. As for Bretonnia, they have multiple lores, but the lore you need almost 100% of the time is the lore of life. You need tons of healing to keep your knights on the field, because your knights are going to have to carry the game for you. You have a bunch of worthless peasants that aren't really worth healing. And as for the only other spells they have the Lore of Heavens and the Lore of Beasts, and they don't have any issues clearing out large amounts of chaff by cycle charging. They have issues taking down large single entities. So none of their lores help them with that. Might as well just heal up. Lord options, you're actually rather limited. You have a couple duelists in Alberic and Lewin that can fly. Rapunzel is a terrible duelist that can be on the ground, but maybe she'll get a rework at some point that makes her viable. And you have the Fey Enchantress as a Mage Lord, Mortis Engine type effect. Your heroes are also largely the same. You have a paladin, a fancy paladin, or an undead paladin. Gotrek and Felix are also fun to throw in here and there. The thing with Bretonnia is you usually know what's coming you usually know what's coming at you. So fighting them, get ready for heavy cav, and punish the peasant archers. If you do that, you'll be fine all the time. Good lores of magic against them, definitely not the Lore of Death. They have tons of healing to counter the Lore of Death. Depending on the state Traderkin's in, the Lore of Wilds with the Beastmen can really decimate their cavalry. Other than that, the Lore of Shadows, even though it's been nerfed, the Lore of Shadows does have some pretty good spells for either winning the cavalry duels or punishing them. Trying to think. Counter Lore of Life is also pretty good. As for Lores of Magic, it's tough to really find one that can punish heavy cav, as I'm thinking about it. Lore of Fire is okay if you want to use Burning Head to clear out all their peasants, but you don't really need to do that. Peasants will fall over on their own. Regardless, Bretonnia, you're going to want anti-large, you're going to want armor piercing. Either, both, a lot of them. Just a lot of them. Take out the cav and you win the game. Lord sniping on Bretonnia can be pretty hard. Lewin and Alberic are rather slippery opponents, and the Fey Enchantress is notorious for being able to survive. Though in Warhammer 3, she has been having a harder time keeping her legs under her. So maybe you can take her out, but in general, just take out the cav and win the game that way. Lord sniping is not usually the best way to go about them. Yeah, you don't usually want to take a fight with like double paladin or paladin and so that's Bretonnia. Kill the cav, win the game. Prepare for cav, win the game. Don't prepare for Cav, prepare to lose.
Roar! Subscribe, yes, yes.